Hi everyone, and welcome to this video which is an introduction to your area of study for Year 11. This video will cover what your area of study is and will give you a basic introduction to this module. It's aimed at Year 11 ESL students. So, in this introduction to ESL, we're going to be examining separately all of the different modules which you need to look at. However, this first series of videos is going to be about that first module, and that module is your area of study. So, in this introduction video, we're going to be splitting the lesson into two parts. The first part is an introduction to your area of study. So asking questions like, what is my area of study? And how can I do well in my area of study using skills which I can teach you? Secondly, we're going to be looking at social awareness. And social awareness is basically using general knowledge and social and cultural knowledge in order to do better in your studies of ESL. So, what is your area of study? Basically, in ESL you're going to be looking at 3 different topics. And that's spread out so that every term you're looking at a different topic. The first topic of these is your area of study. So it's one of the 3 topics which you're going to be studying for Year 11. Basically what this is you will be studying a theme which your teacher will choose for you. So in this video, if I don't mention the theme which you happen to be studying, don't stress, because all you need to do is apply the general skills which I'll be teaching to whatever theme you'll be studying. So for example, some common themes might include change, journeys, migration, relationships, and family. As I've said, these are just some common themes, but if you are not studying one of these themes, there's no need to stress because your teacher has certainly still chosen a good theme, and you just need to take the skills which we learned today and apply that to whatever theme you'll be looking at. So, what is an area of study? And as we often call it, an AOS. An area of study is a focus on a key theme in various forms across texts. So instead of just studying one text and looking at the themes in that, instead what you're doing is taking one theme and then looking how that same theme is seen in a number of different texts. As I've said, your area of study or your thematic study is one key word or phrase, and this key word becomes the basis of your topic during that module. During this module, I want you to be asking yourself 3 different questions, and today we're going to be examining the way that you can answer these questions. The first question is, how can I define the theme? So by this, what we mean is, what does your area of study actually mean? And how can you work with the meaning of your area of study to create an excellent comprehension answer or essay? The second question is, how does the technique create the theme? So, in this, what you're going to be doing is going through each of your texts and finding techniques which demonstrate the theme to the reader. The third question is, how does the theme make the reader feel? So, in this you're going to be giving your personal response, looking for techniques, identifying the theme, and then really showing the way that this makes you feel as a reader. So let's just quickly examine the structure of your area of study for Year 12, and it's really important to remember that while you're not yet in Year 12, what you do in Year 11, you can later transfer to Year 12. So get the basics down now, and that's going to help you so much at the end of the day. So, in Year 12, your topic for your area of study, or your thematic study, is going to be belonging. Now, I'm sure you've all heard about HSC students talking about belonging, and once you get to Year 12, you'll also be examining this topic. The texts which you'll be studying, again, are based on what your teacher chooses. However, these are off a set list provided by the Board of Studies. So text-wise, you're looking at 2 set texts of this list, and then 1 related text, which you need to choose and analyse on your own. So in a later video, we're going to be looking at the way in which you can choose and then analyse these texts effectively. Thirdly, in your exam, the exam is basically split into two parts for your area of study. The first part is a comprehension, which is worth 25 marks. And we're going to be looking at a whole video later dealing with how to answer this comprehension section. Secondly, you're going to be answering an essay, and this is where the knowledge of your two set texts and your one related text really come in. And you need to have quotes, techniques, and examples from those texts in order to create a really good essay. Now, don't be daunted by this because, as we've said, this isn't till the end of Year 12, so you have 2 years to gear up to this structure. So, we're now going to take a look at the Area of Study rubric. The Area of Study rubric is basically what the Board of Studies writes out to all of their students, outlining exactly what you need to know in order to complete your area of study successfully. Now, the rubric is often the absolutely most daunting thing at the beginning of your topic. It's full of long words. However, don't worry, because in just a moment after we read it, we're going to go through and look at exactly what all of these long words mean for you at the end of the day. So let's just read through this quickly. The language study within an area of study builds on and extends the development of skills in responding to and composing texts undertaken in the preliminary course. Students' language skills, knowledge, and understanding are reinforced and extended as they respond to and compose longer, more sustained, and more complex texts at and beyond the literal level, and further develop their understanding of the ways in which meaning is shaped in and through texts. They synthesize ideas to clarify meaning and develop new meanings. They take into account whether aspects such as context, purpose, and register, text structures, stylistic features, grammatical features, and vocabulary are appropriate to the particular text. So, what does all this writing mean? Obviously that seems really daunting, but let's go through it now. Firstly, what your area of study asks you to do is to build on the skills which you'll develop in Year 11. So this is so important for you to remember because everything which you learn this year, the area of study wants you to make more sophisticated and more interesting next year. So there really is a flow-on effect. Secondly, your area of study provides a focus on language skills, general knowledge, and understanding texts. So within your area of study, you're really going to be doing a language study and improving your English. Also, it allows you to read texts and write your own. So you're not only going to be reading texts and writing essays on that, but you're also going to be creating your own texts. So you really get to do two very different things, all within the umbrella of your area of study. You are also going to be reading more difficult texts at a deeper level. This means that you're going to be looking at texts individually and then also looking at the links between texts. So the texts which you look at are going to be a little bit trickier to read at the beginning, but at the end of the day are going to be a lot more interesting once you understand them. The great thing about your area of study is that you're not just looking at one text and getting bored of that text, but you're looking at a whole lot of different texts and the relationships between those. So you really have a lot to look forward to in this unit. The question which you're probably asking now is, should I be worrying about belonging? Now, as we've said, belonging is going to be your area of study once you get to Year 12. However, at this point, there's no real need to be worrying about belonging. This particular theme you're going to be focusing on so much in Year 12, you don't really need to be looking at that now. However, the area of study structure which you're going to be looking at in Year 11, you definitely need to be thinking about. Don't be thinking, I'm in Year 11, it's not the big year yet. It's really important that at this point, you learn the structure of your area of study and you learn the skills which are going to make Year 12 so much easier for you. Therefore, what you can do is understand the idea of an area of study. For example, the difference between a related text and a prepared text. And we're going to be looking at that in later videos, and that's something which you can definitely apply once you get to Year 12. So, now we're going to be looking at some methods for approaching your area of study. So at first, your area of study may seem really scary, and that's totally understandable, because coming into year 11, this is a brand new topic which you've probably never really thought about before. However, the next 2 years are going to make sure you're really familiar with the structure of this module. Doing an area of study in year 11 is going to give you practice for your HSC year. So make sure you pay attention during year 11 in order to get the best out of year 12. Let's look at some methods for approaching your area of study. Now, these methods are also going to be really helpful in developing your language skills as ESL students. Because the really important thing to remember is that the more English you write and the more English you speak and practice with, that is going to make it easier for you at the end of the day. So while it may seem a little bit tedious, the more you do, the easier it's going to get. So, the first technique is a mind map. Basically, with a mind map, you write your key theme in the very middle of the page. So whatever theme for your area of study that happens to be. Then you're going to be surrounding that theme with all of your different ideas. So for example, you write change in the middle and then fill the rest of the page with everything else you can think of to do with that area of study. These can be things that are specific to your text, or even just ideas that you have are a little bit more broad. Anything, just whack them down on that page. This is really important because it allows you to look at really different perspectives about that area of study. So you're never just thinking about one thing to do with it, but you're always thinking about the different ways in which your area of study can be interpreted. This range of ideas is really going to be able to help you when you're writing your essays. So you can get out your mind map and use all the things which you've written around the page as a starting point for the essays which you can write. The second method is to use a dictionary. Now obviously dictionaries can just provide you with the basic meaning of a word. However, for you and your area of study, you can use a dictionary to build up a really sophisticated understanding of what your key theme means. So it's really important that you never only use one source. You must make sure you use multiple dictionaries. So if you only have one, maybe go to the library and borrow another one, or ask your English teacher for another one. Look up as many definitions as you possibly can. You can also use encyclopedias, or even encyclopedias or information websites online. Anything that gives you a bit of background information on what your theme is. You can look for things like quotes from philosophers, scientists, and literary figures. Quotes are things which you can directly quote from other sources in your essay. And this gives the marker a really good indication that you've done your research and that you've come to your exam really very prepared. The third technique is to write your own definitions. Now, as we've talked about, the best way to improve your language skills as an ESL student is to constantly practice writing in English. So, what you should do is write sentences, examples, definitions, and ideas. Anything you can think of to do with your area of study, get them down on the page. This means that you can keep writing until you've exhausted all of your thoughts and ideas on the topic. Make sure that everything you've talked about in class, everything you can see in your texts, is all written out in different definitions which you can play around with. The fourth technique is wide reading. Now, in a minute, we're going to be looking at some ideas of social awareness. Wide reading is such a really valuable way to achieve social awareness, which we're going to go on to discuss. But basically, wide reading provides you with a good general knowledge and background in order to really understand what your texts have to say. For example, if you're studying the rabbit-proof fence as your ESL text, you really are going to have to understand what the Aboriginal people were going through and what the context of that film is. And that's where wide reading comes in. So you're looking at things like newspapers or newspapers that are online. You're looking at articles, adverts, feature articles, editorials, short stories, poems, blogs, and forums. Anything that has information which you can read and take in. You also want to have an understanding of society and culture surrounding your text. as well as having a knowledge of current events. So what you might decide to do is every week just sit down and read the headlines so you know what's going on. It's also a really good idea to have an understanding of modern and particularly Australian history, because Australian history is what a lot of your ESL texts come from. So in later videos, we'll be looking at an introduction to Australian history and the way in which you can use a knowledge of this to have a better essay at the end of the day. Social awareness for senior studies, as we've discussed, is so important in having really just a building block for answering your essay questions. So it's really important to remember that texts you study in year 11 and 12 have a social message. Now, a social message is something which really makes you think and something that's really an important concern for society. This means that what your texts are doing is trying to teach you something about life or a topic which you'll study. So understanding your social message is so important in order to achieve the best ideas in your essay. It's important for you to understand the context of this message. And social awareness, or the idea of having a background knowledge on whatever topic you're looking at, is the number one way to achieve this. Basically, what context means is the time or place a text comes from. So every time you study a text in this area of study unit, you don't just need to understand what happens in the text, but what the background of the text is. And in later videos, we're going to be examining the way in which specific texts you can understand their contexts. So that's coming up later. This includes society's ideals during that period. So what this unit is really asking you to do is understand what society thought and then applying that to whatever context and text you're looking at. So having this background is a little bit tricky at the beginning, but is really going to be incredibly helpful. So these are some things which you should have a brief background knowledge of. A bit of Australian history, Aboriginal history, colonial times, and these things are going to help you understand your texts. And we're going to be examining exactly what these things were and then how you can use this for your ESL advantage. And we'll be looking at that in later videos. Achieving sophistication is such an important element of ESL, because basically what you're trying to do is not only show that you understand your text, but that you understand English to the point that you can write in a sophisticated and interesting way. So, it's really good to know that high marks are awarded to sophisticated and well-rounded answers. This means that your answers must be both right and also well presented. So while you're working in this unit, you're really going to be focusing on mastering the idea of a language study, becoming more familiar with English, and then using this to your essay's advantage. This means that, as we've discussed, you'll have an awareness of different things like context, general knowledge, social problems, current events, and basic history. All of these things are going to be building blocks for your success. Let's just look at some sample general knowledge questions. Perhaps you can use questions like this in order to ensure that you have the basic general knowledge to do well in ESL. For example, name as many ancient civilizations and empires as you can and try to put them on a timeline. You can answer this question. Which countries are the global superpowers on Earth today? Why are they in charge? So you're thinking about these sort of questions and using them to your advantage. You can also look at questions like this. What countries have access to the internet? Basic general knowledge questions like this, and obviously not just these three questions, but any question or any headline or any issue which you happen to stumble across. The more you know, the more you're going to understand at the end of the day. So, the way you can achieve this is through some further reading, as we've discussed. You should read or watch a reputable news source once a week. You can also do things like browse Wikipedia articles on defining human events. You shouldn't worry too much about this, as later on we're going to be examining some specific issues in Australian history and looking at how you can apply these to your studies. Also, as we've discussed, a knowledge of society and culture, as well as current events such as the headlines, and also modern and Australian history are going to provide you with the building blocks for doing well in ESL. And it's so important that once you understand these things, you can use these to improve the context, background, and information in your essays. So, that brings us to the end of our lesson today, which gives you an introduction to your area of study for ESL. While this all seems a little daunting at the beginning, don't worry, because as we've said, you have 2 years to master these skills. In the next videos, we'll be looking at the way in which you can build upon your understanding of your area of study to not only improve your language skills, but also understand and analyse some really interesting texts for your final exams.